The summer sun beat down hard on the small town, casting long shadows over the streets. In the middle of Main Street, people hurried in and out of shops, grabbing groceries or chatting with neighbors. Among them was Mrs. Louise Carter, an elderly black woman who had lived in the community her entire life. Despite her age and frail steps, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Everyone who knew her respected her gentle spirit and her unwavering strength. That afternoon, Mrs. Carter entered a corner store to pick up a few essentials. She moved slowly, her cane tapping against the tile floor, but her presence was warm. She greeted the cashier and a few customers with a polite smile. To many, she was like a grandmother figure, someone who had seen generations grow up. But as she approached the counter, a sharp voice cut through the air. A white police officer, tall and heavyset, stepped directly in front of her. His name was Officer Bradley, and his reputation around town was already tarnished. Known for his arrogance and short temper, he often carried himself as if his badge gave him the right to belittle others. "Move aside, old woman," he barked, his tone dripping with disdain. "I don't have time to wait on you." The store grew quiet. The cashier froze, and a few customers looked away, uncomfortable. Mrs. Carter, taken aback, tightened her grip on her cane. Her voice trembled but carried firmness. "Son, I was here first. You can wait your turn like everyone else." Bradley sneered, his face hardening. "Don't talk back to me. You think your age gives you special treatment? You people always expect something." His words cut deep, heavy with racial venom. Gasps rippled through the store. An elderly woman who had never once raised her voice against anyone suddenly found herself the target of open humiliation. And then, in a moment that would sear itself into the memory of everyone present, Officer Bradley leaned forward and spat directly at her feet. The air seemed to shatter. Mrs. Carter's eyes widened in disbelief. Her hands shook as she steadied herself with her cane. Never in all her years had she endured such blatant disrespect. Not from strangers, and certainly not from someone who wore the uniform sworn to protect. Customers murmured, some pulling out their phones to record. The cashier looked horrified, whispering under his breath, "This isn't right." Mrs. Carter stood tall despite the tears welling in her eyes. "You shame that badge," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of generations who had suffered before her. "And one day you will answer for it." Bradley smirked, brushing off her words. "The only person answering here is you, for holding up the line." He shoved past her, knocking her cane slightly. She stumbled but quickly regained her balance. Unbeknownst to him, however, that single act of cruelty had set in motion a chain of events that would soon turn his arrogance into regret, and Mrs. Carter's quiet dignity into undeniable strength. The moment Officer Bradley spat at Mrs. Carter, the atmosphere in the store shifted from uneasy silence to simmering outrage. A woman near the entrance clutched her child's hand tighter, whispering, "Don't ever forget this is what hate looks like." A young man with his phone already recording angled the camera higher, capturing every second of the officer's contempt. Mrs. Carter, though shaken, refused to let her voice break. She steadied herself and looked Bradley directly in the eyes. "You disgrace not just yourself," she said quietly, "but every officer who tries to do right." Her words struck deeper than her tone suggested. Some customers murmured in agreement, their courage building in the safety of numbers. A middle-aged man stepped forward. "Officer, that was uncalled for. You should be protecting her, not humiliating her." Bradley's head snapped toward him, anger flashing. "You trying to tell me how to do my job?" His hand hovered near his belt, and the man quickly stepped back, though not before muttering, "We all saw what you did." Phones were lifted higher now, red recording dots glowing across the store. Bradley noticed, his jaw tightening, but his pride refused to bend. He muttered a curse under his breath and turned toward the door, brushing past the gathering crowd. As he pushed outside, Mrs. Carter slowly made her way to a nearby chair. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the deep ache of humiliation. The cashier rushed over with a glass of water. "Mrs. Carter, are you all right?" She nodded faintly, though her eyes glistened. "I've lived long enough to see the worst of people," she said softly. "But it never gets easier." A young woman knelt beside her, holding her hand. "You don't deserve this. Not you. Not ever. We'll make sure people see what happened." Within minutes, the incident began to spread. The videos uploaded from cell phones gained traction online, circulating through the town's social media groups. The comments poured in shock, anger, and disgust. People who had known Mrs. Carter their whole lives couldn't believe what they were seeing. "She's like a grandmother to this whole neighborhood," one user wrote. "And that officer thought he could spit on her like she was nothing? He picked the wrong woman." By the time Mrs. Carter left the store, escorted gently by concerned neighbors, a small crowd had gathered outside. Some clapped for her as she walked, others offered hugs, while a few shouted after Bradley, demanding his badge. The officer had already disappeared down the street, but his actions lingered like a dark stain on the air. No one doubted consequences would follow, because Mrs. Carter wasn't just another elderly woman. She was someone whose life touched nearly every corner of the community. And, though Bradley didn't yet know it, she was also the mother of a man who now held more power than he could ever imagine. Later that evening, the town buzzed with talk of the disgraceful scene at the store. Videos of Officer Bradley's actions had gone viral within hours, sparking outrage not only in the neighborhood but across nearby cities as well. Messages of support for Mrs. Carter poured in, while demands for accountability mounted louder by the minute. But what no one outside her family knew yet was that Mrs. Carter's son had recently returned to town. His name was Marcus Carter, a man who had built a remarkable career in law enforcement. After years of service in larger metropolitan areas, where he earned respect for his fairness and integrity, Marcus had been appointed the new chief of police, the very department where Officer Bradley wore his badge. The appointment had been announced only days earlier, though his official introduction to the public was scheduled for later that week. For Marcus, the role wasn't just a job. It was a mission to reform a system that had long allowed arrogance and prejudice to fester unchecked. He intended to make the badge mean honor again. That night, Marcus sat in his office, going through briefing reports, when a flood of notifications lit up his phone. His jaw clenched as he opened one of the trending videos. There, on the screen, he saw his elderly mother, frail but standing strong, facing down an officer who spat at her feet like she was worthless. Marcus froze, his chest tightening. Anger surged through him, but not the kind that clouded judgment, the kind that sharpened it. He replayed the video twice more, each time his resolve hardening. This wasn't just a personal insult. It was proof of exactly why he had taken this role. By morning, the entire department had seen the footage. Officers whispered in hallways, many embarrassed, some silently supportive of the victim. Bradley, however, strutted in as if nothing had happened. "Just another old lady making a scene," he muttered to a colleague. He didn't know. Not yet. At 9 a.m., Marcus Carter entered headquarters for his first formal address to his officers. His uniform was crisp, his presence commanding. Conversations hushed as he walked in, the weight of authority surrounding him. Bradley leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smirking faintly, oblivious to what was about to unfold. "Good morning," Marcus began. "As your new chief, I intend to make it clear that this department will stand for justice, accountability, and respect. No exceptions." His eyes swept the room, landing briefly on Bradley, though the officer shifted uncomfortably under the gaze. Marcus paused, then continued. "Last night, one of our officers disgraced this department. He spat on an elderly woman. He humiliated her in public. And he thought no one would hold him accountable." The room stiffened. Bradley's smirk faded. Marcus took a deep breath before delivering the final blow. "That woman is my mother." Gasps rippled across the room. Bradley's face drained of color. Suddenly, the arrogance that had carried him for years crumbled into fear. The room stayed frozen in stunned silence. Officer Bradley shifted on his feet, his arrogance evaporating as the weight of Marcus Carter's words sank in. Murmurs broke out among the ranks, some officers glancing at one another in disbelief, others shaking their heads at the shame of it all. Marcus let the moment hang before speaking again, his voice calm but edged with steel. What happened last night wasn't just an insult to my mother. It was an insult to this badge. It was an insult to the oath each of us swore, to protect and to serve. There is no place in this department for those who think their power is a weapon for humiliation. He turned his gaze directly on Bradley. Officer Bradley, you have disgraced yourself, this uniform, and this community. Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation. Bradley tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Chief, Enough, Marcus interrupted sharply. The video speaks louder than any excuse you could offer. You thought no one would hold you accountable. Well, accountability is here. 2 internal affairs officers stepped forward at Marcus's signal. They escorted Bradley out of the room. His head hung low, the swagger that once defined him gone. For the first time in years, many of his colleagues felt relief. His behavior had embarrassed them all, and justice was finally catching up. When the meeting ended, Marcus returned home to find his mother sitting peacefully on her porch. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with quiet pride. You didn't have to make it personal, she said gently, though her smile betrayed how deeply she appreciated it. Marcus knelt beside her chair. Mama, it was personal. But not just because it was you. It was personal for every person in this town who's ever been made to feel less than human. I promised when I took this job I'd make a change. Yesterday just reminded me why that promise matters. Mrs. Carter squeezed his hand, her voice soft but steady. Your strength isn't just in punishing wrong, Marcus. It's in showing others how to rise above it. That officer tried to take my dignity, but he failed. Because dignity isn't his to give or take. It's ours to keep. Word of the chief's actions spread quickly. The community rallied behind him, praising his swift and decisive stance. Neighbors came by to check on Mrs. Carter, bringing food, flowers, and words of admiration. To them, she wasn't just a victim. She was a symbol of resilience. As for Officer Bradley, his downfall served as a stark reminder. Authority without respect is hollow, and cruelty always finds its way back to its source. Standing once more before the townspeople later that week, Chief Marcus Carter declared, "This department belongs to the people. Every person, regardless of age, race, or background, deserves respect. That will be our standard from this day forward." The crowd erupted in applause, not just for the new chief, but for the message he carried. A message born from his mother's strength and his own unshakable resolve. And from that day on, no one in that town doubted that dignity, once defended, could never be taken away.